Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Luke, and today I wanted to introduce a concept that I think a lot of you guys might be missing. I know I was missing it, like, I don't know, a year ago when I was even more of a noob than I am now. It's about your mixes and how to start to understand the 3D space that's involved in your mix and how to kind of place your instruments throughout there to kind of make them more realistic or mesh better. Before we get into it though, how about a quick update? So since my last video, I started playing guitar, which I'm really psyched about because I've already started using it in some of my music, which you guys are going to hear as soon as possible. And I also got a new mic, which you might be able to tell. I'm sure it sounds a lot better than my Snowball that I was using. So I'm using this for some vocals, which I'm also incorporating into some music, which you'll hear eventually. And I'm also using it to record my acoustic. This is a Audio-Technica AT2035, if you're wondering. I think since I don't have anything high quality to compare it to, I'm not sure how it stacks up to other more expensive stuff, but I think around the $150 range, 100 to 150, the AT2020 or the 2035 are good options. And then as far as I know, the next best thing is probably the Shure SM7B, but I felt like this was a good option to not spend twice as much quite yet because I've heard good things about it. So I'm going to try to do lots of recording with this and see how it goes first. And also let me know if you have any questions about learning guitar. I've been using the Fender Play app and I'm like 75% done with it, so it's going well so far. I'm also using other tutorial videos kind of on the side to supplement in ways that I think I need. I also highly recommend watching Tomo Fujita if you don't already, and you're interested in guitar. He's got great content outside of just wanting to learn guitar, and the fact that he's an entertaining individual. He's John Mayer's guitar teacher, who teaches at Berkeley, if you didn't know that. I will say, especially for people who have considered it before, I am learning faster than I expected. I have gotten over the little humps that might discourage you, like when it's really hard to change chords at a fast speed and then it eventually clicks and it's like, wow, okay, that wasn't that hard, as long as you practice a little bit every day. So not only is it something that I've wanted to get into because I like the idea of being able to play for fun, like blues and in kind of like a jam context, but the reason why I like guitar so much right now is because of the simple idea that it's literally creating the sound at your fingertips that then goes into the computer. And by that I mean you are actually creating the sound waves rather than triggering a MIDI sound on a keyboard. And I just like the idea of actual audio being created that can be incorporated in your compositions because it's coming straight from your studio space, and it kind of just feels more personal. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. I still intend to work on my keyboard skills alongside guitar, because with guitar, theory has been increasingly easier for me to understand because of the guitar context that I'm learning. So I'll be working on keyboard alongside that to try and spread my theory knowledge to the keyboard as well, because it's an even simpler representation of theory in the way that you can visually look at all the notes, but being able to train myself to improv to get some quicker results in my production sessions would be really cool. Oh, and if you can guess the guitar riff that I introed with, then I'll shout you out in my next video. So the thing I wanted to talk about today is in regards to the 3D space that your mix takes up, the metaphorical 3D space within your headphones or your listening experience. So I think we're familiar with the option to pan your instruments left and right over here in this little panning dial. So that covers your left and right. You can also use plugins like imagers, like the Ozone Imager, which is what I think is very widely used. I also use recently on some instruments Wider by Polyverse and Infected Mushroom. They're also a free download in case you were wondering, so you can go grab that and try it out. Another dimension that you have is, in some cases, up and down. Usually that's perceived by brightness and air, and I think really the way that you achieve kind of like vertical space is kind of more mysterious and just like kind of happens inside some plugins like EQs and maybe some exciters and stuff. But I don't know, generally I guess you might visualize vertical space in terms of a frequency spectrum, and it's not as easy to pinpoint as left and right. But the one that I wanted to talk about today is kind of this z-axis of front and back. If you're anything like I was before I learned this, you're probably thinking that to mix your instruments, you basically want higher volumes of your primary instruments and lower volumes of your secondary instruments. Well, that's just not that realistic, especially because those instruments should really be denoted by the space that they take up in a room. Let's say, like if we're trying to replicate how a recording session would sound, like especially if you're in a room with like no mics and stuff, and you have an acoustic guitar over here and a cajon and like some bongos and a shaker. Those are going to occupy different spaces because different individuals are playing them in chairs that are, you know, a few feet apart, and you're going to be stationed somewhere where those things immerse you in the experience because of the fact that they are taking up different physical spaces in your room that you're observing the music in. So let's say if we're making a trap beat, even though some trap is designed to be plasticky sounding than realistic, like in a room of multiple performers, you still don't necessarily want to leave all of your instruments in the same position, and then just tweak volumes to decide which is more prominent. The simple concept that I want to introduce that you guys can play around with is compression to simulate distance. So I learned this from Matt Zoe. Shout out Matt Zoe. When I learned that from one of his videos, my perspective changed. It's one of those things where I've referenced in my other videos that the things that I want to share often are things that helped me cross a line into feeling more in control of the music. And in lots of cases, being in control involves understanding complex parameters that need to be fine-tuned and stuff. But like if you put the time into learning how to do those things, then I mean that's the whole point. Like by then you'll have understanding enough to make those details perfect. So yeah, once you realize that mixing isn't just tweaking levels up and down, you realize that there's more options that you have to cause things to really feel like they're taking up different spaces. So what I have here is a drum kit that I made in Labs. Or actually, the drum kit is from Labs, and I just made this beat in MIDI. So here's what it sounds like. So first off, I have recommended Labs before, but I will do it again. I think you can tell that this drum kit is really good at sounding live. When you tweak the, and you'll want to really mess around with this, when you tweak the velocities, you can really hear the nuanced differences in the playing that they did to record each level of velocity, because the character totally changes in the drum. It's completely different from, if you're unfamiliar with using drum kits like this, it's completely different from taking a sampler and varying the velocity inside that MIDI, because all it's doing is changing the volume of each note that you're varying. This kit sounds really lifelike, and you can get those really subtle like rolls and things, like, and then you can make them even quieter, and just you can do things that sound like only a live drummer would do, and that they don't sound like programmed drums that you got from some trap hype beast kit. So then what I'm using for an example is a percussion loop that you might want to put on top of a beat. So unaffected, it sounds like this. The concept that I want to introduce for you to use creatively in your own way is the concept of compressing to kind of place in your mind where on this z-axis the sound is taking place. So obviously these drums, your core kit, are going to occupy the more front and center area of your drum category. But then things like percussions that add this like flavor, or just like the rattle to your to the top of your drums, or like enhance the groove to just kind of like put a layer over everything. Those are going to be likely farther back in your mix. So let's say you have a rock song, and the drums, guitar, and vocals, let's say, are going to be your primary focuses that you want. The person who's playing the egg shaker isn't going to be right in front of the vocal microphone and shaking it right next to the vocalist. In your mental space of where they're going to be, is they're going to be behind the vocalist, behind the guitar player, and probably off to the side. The way that you emulate distance is through dynamics. So more dynamics makes the sound appear in your mind as closer, because of the way air affects signals or affects audio waves. The farther away something is going to have fewer dynamics. And it's also going to feel like you can't exactly place where it's coming from. So let me demonstrate this with a glue compressor right here. So basically, another way to put this is, whenever I am looking to place an instrument farther back in the mix, I grab a glue compressor, I slap it in, and I turn the attack and release all the way down. And then what I do is I start to drag the threshold. So before we even talk about the mix, let me demonstrate what this sounds like as I sweep the compression threshold down. To me, it sounds like there's like a horse or something, and he's galloping away from you. Now, as I crank the threshold back closer to 0, it's going to sound like that rattling is coming towards you. So there's a demonstration of how the dynamics basically dictate where it feels like to your brain the sound is coming from. Now, yes, we're also making it quieter in effect. Like taking a threshold all the way down like this is obviously quieter. But it's the combination of making it a little bit quieter and taking the peak dynamics out to make it start to feel like it's sitting farther back. So let's just see kind of what these sound like together. Now, I also threw a lazy sidechain from the drum kit onto here, so that way it's mixed a little bit more realistically for me. So let's see what it sounds like now with my drum kit. So maybe my volume fader isn't perfect right now, but like I was saying, a secondary element such as this percussion, it sounds like it's being placed right in front of like the primary drum mics, or it's like going through the vocal mic or whatever, because it's right up front. We don't want that because it just doesn't fit. It's obviously not meant to be a primary element. It's fighting for space with the drums. So let's start to feel how it sits as we take this compression threshold down and hopefully move it back into the mix. Now, honestly, I think it's still a little bit too loud, but it does obviously feel like it's moving backwards. Now, you can also, I don't know if I would use it in this context, but in mixing your percussion and stuff, you definitely want to consider using some different stereo options like little micro shift or even panning. Reverb is another way to put your drums or any instrument into a different space, because obviously mixing is about more or less giving instruments their space and doing it in a tasteful way. So what you're doing, let's say you have a bass in mono. In order to get the guitars out of the way from it, you make them wider because you don't want them contesting over the same space. So in this case, I might make my percs a little bit wider than the than the primary drums, I should say. But let's go ahead and leave it off for now. So let me put it like this. A instrument that you introduce into your track, go ahead and visualize what the instrument is, and then where do you imagine that it would be placed in a room, or even in your head, where would it be placed if you were to envision all of the instruments in your song? Where should it be placed? And then you can start to use the tools at your disposal to start to place it. And I think the reason why I chose to focus on this point is because it's one of the main ones that I mean, I was kind of perplexed and mind blown when I learned this for the first time, because I don't know, it just seems ultimately a little bit esoteric to think about, having to exploit kind of the way that the brain has evolved to interpret distance from the dynamic range of a sound. So, the fact that I learned that spontaneously was like, it opened up a lot more understanding and possibility for mixing. But I won't get into mixing any more elements today, because I just kind of wanted to talk about this relatively simple concept, and all you need is a stock glue compressor. I mean, you can use any compressor, but I like the interface of this one for this purpose. And I just want you guys to be able to start messing around and understanding how you have the power to start to dictate where your stuff sits in the mix. One day you're going to know everything there is to know, and now hopefully you know one more thing, and you can start to control your music a little bit more specifically and consciously. So I don't claim to have, mix this perfectly and mix this loop on top of the drums or anything. I'm just trying to show you guys that that taking out your dynamics can start to pull your thing back, pull your instrument back in the mix. And I want you to be able to go from feeling like a noob, as in, tweaking your levels until it's like not too loud. And, I want you to be able to understand that the way that your elements take up space in your mix isn't limited to just volume. There are tricks that your mind plays to place things into the space of your mix that you can start to manipulate, and just be conscious of all those things. Think about panning when you visualize where your instrument's placed, and think about your x-axis or your z-axis in terms of your dynamics. Anyway, that's pretty much all I want to say for right now. I hope you didn't know this, so that way you've learned something by watching this. Please let me know if you have any more questions about this topic. I hope you feel like less of a noob now, if you are one. Please let me know if you guys have any questions or prompts for material on some of my next videos, or if you have any simple questions I can answer in the comments for you. Otherwise, stay tuned. I hope to have some music out very soon. I don't exactly know how it's going to work out, because I have a couple different categories of music that I'm kind of dipped my hands into right now. But I'm hoping to have some out, and I'll definitely be announcing it via some videos out here on YouTube whenever those tunes are ready. Anyway, hit me up if I can do anything for you. Strike up a conversation in the comments if you want. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next video. Peace. Hope you guys are having a good one.